Breaking news on Track in the Tropics. Elsa returns to hurricane status, a Category 1 hurricane set to make landfall north of Tampa Bay, Florida, Wednesday morning. Interactive analysis, a live report from the Florida coast, and a meteorologist Q&A coming your way here on Track in the Tropics. Hey there, everybody. JB Buno here with you back again in your hurricane headquarters. A lot to get to. Elsa back to hurricane status, as we've been talking about here on Track in the Tropics over the course of the day. This was something that was expected based on, of course, all the data that we've been getting from the National Hurricane Center. We have a panel of meteorologists and reporters to let you know about here. Joining us from WRIC in Richmond, Virginia, it's Chief Meteorologist John Bernier standing by for a live report. We also have Allison Henning joining us from Anna Maria Island. She's standing by to let us know what conditions are really like out there. But first off, we start with Track in the Tropics meteorologist Ian Oliver for the very latest on the 8 o'clock advisory from the NHC. Hey, Ian.
JB, good evening. Yeah, we just got this advisory from the National Hurricane Center. We've been talking about this throughout the day today, that we were expecting the name of this to change. That's essentially all that's changed. Tropical Storm Elsa to now Hurricane Elsa. You look at the maximum sustained winds to 75 miles per hour. From 70 miles per hour, that was the bump up. As far as the impacts we've been talking about all day today, and really over the last few days, those have not changed. But we can show you the latest satellite and radar picture from Hurricane Elsa. That's the mid-level center of circulation, we think. You can see that in the radar imagery. You look on the western and southern side of this, you can see the impacts that dry air is still having on this system. Essentially, much lighter returns coming back to the radar on the western and southern side as some of that dry air gets wrapped into this lopsided system. So still not a classic structure by any stretch. We've bumped up the intensity of this system, but the impacts and the shape of this storm, essentially all the same. That lopsided structure is what brings the worst of this onshore into the Tampa Bay area as we move through the rest of the evening and into the overnight hours tonight. So you see the icons now, Category 1, Hurricane Elsa, moving awfully close to our west coast of Florida here, with a landfall expected just north of the viewing area up into portions of Levy County, a possibility up towards a Cedar Key or even up into Dixie County from there. Minimum pressure now down to 996 millibars. Look at the motion, though. That's crucial as we move into the overnight hours tonight. Was moving north at 10 miles per hour. In this latest update, it's moving north at 14 miles per hour. So the faster this gets by us, the faster we can get rid of the impacts that we're going to be dealing with over the next several hours. And you can see that path once it gets beyond us here in the Tampa Bay area, through coastal parts of Georgia, up through the Carolinas, eventually up the East Coast and heading for the Canadian Maritimes. But in the short term, the impacts are essentially upon us. The ones we've been talking about for several days now, all the same, even though the name of this system now Hurricane Elsa. You see our spaghetti plots, forecast models now in very good agreement with the path of this system, with a landfall just off to our north. But unfortunately, with the structure of this system, its lopsided nature, all the heavy rainfall, the gusty winds, those will be reaching the Tampa Bay coastline as we move on through the next several hours. Tornado watch, that's still in effect. Pinellas, Hillsborough, Polk County points south from there. This may need to be extended for our northern counties once we move into the overnight hours and that center of circulation gets a bit closer. We'll get some of those stronger rain bands moving on shore that contain a lot of spin and can produce some tornadoes. Our tropical alerts, we've got hurricane warnings up, coastal parts of Hillsborough, all of Pinellas, coastal areas along the Nature Coast, Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus. Elsewhere, inland parts of Hillsborough, farther up the Nature Coast, and points south from there. That's where we still have tropical storm warnings in effect. Whole coastline of the Tampa Bay area has that storm surge warning up, with the possibility of 3 to as much as 5 feet at worst of sea level rise. Once the wind direction shifts back to the west, we get an onshore flow, and that pushes water onto our coastlines and into the bay, where it piles up and it can't go anywhere but up, unfortunately. This is storm surge potential coming off the forecast model directly from the National Hurricane Center. You see places shaded in blue along the Manatee and Sarasota coastlines. 1 to 3 inches of surge a possibility. Same story as we move up into the bay, portions of Pinellas and coastal Hillsborough County. 1 to 3 inches, maybe 4 feet, 1 to 3 feet, maybe 4 feet on the high side. But what we're really concerned about, a little bit closer to where that center actually comes on shore, would be places like Hernando and Citrus County, where you can see some of those yellows trying to pop onto the map. That's indicating places that could see 3 to as much as 5 feet of surge. So we'll certainly be watching that with the high tide cycle. Thankful for the motion of this storm moving north pretty quickly. that brings really only one high tide cycle into the fold that we're concerned about heading into the overnight hours tonight. For most of us, it's after midnight and before 3 a.m., the high tide cycle where we could see the highest water in our area. Now, this is Max Defender 8, our S-band radar. We can see into the core of this system now, that mid-level circulation where we're seeing the most intense part of Elsa at this point. Heavy rainfall, thankfully, offshore of southern parts of Sarasota County right now. Farther to the south in Charlotte and Lee County, they're seeing some heavy rainfall. But as we put this into motion, you can't see the worst of it. This intense band right here looks to be about 20 miles offshore of Sarasota County. In fact, the center of that mid-level center, the swirl, you could see that was fairly well defined on radar. That's about 45 miles off to the southwest of Sarasota at this point. There it is right there as detected by Max Defender 8. A lot of lightning on the north side of that center of circulation. We're talking about Manatee and Sarasota County on Max Defender 8 right now. Coastal parts of Manatee County in Anna Maria Island. That's where we have Allison Henning reporting from the beach. How's it looking like, Allison?
Hey, Ian. Well, we've had some pretty strong wind gusts out here. As for the rain, it's been pretty sporadic. I am thankful, as you mentioned, that that rain is staying offshore right now because I've been able to stay pretty dry, and I do know that window out here is going to be coming to a close pretty soon. I do want to go ahead and give you a look at our view, the waves crashing into the shoreline here. We are live from Manatee Beach right now, which you'll run into right at the end, the west end of State Road 64 here on Anna Maria Island. The beach here is closed to the public. Now, Beach Patrol, we've seen them out here, as well as Holmes Beach Police and Manatee County Sheriff's deputies. They have been patrolling the area, reminding people they're not supposed to be out here. As it has become more ominous out here, the number of people has continued to shrink, which is a good thing. That is what the officials want to see. So the big concern out here on Anna Maria Island is really the flooding and the storm surge. Just 8 months ago during Tropical Storm Ada, this barrier island, it was really hit pretty hard with those two things, and some people had their homes flooded out. They had to do some pretty extensive repairs after that storm. So many of them this time around are taking this one pretty seriously. Of course, now we know it has been upgraded to a Category 1 storm. With the high tide again happening in the middle of the night, similar to Ada, as this storm is moving through our area too. Manatee County officials, they tell us they have had to replenish the sandbag sites out here multiple times throughout the day because a lot of people were taking advantage of those and sandbagging their homes to avoid, that intrusion and trying to protect their homes as much as possible. High tide out here on Manatee Beach is expected right around 2 a.m. We, of course, are going to continue to monitor the conditions out here. We do want to mention one thing that is important to know. There is a storm shelter open to the public. It is at Manatee High School. Manatee County officials say that's ideal for anyone who lives on a barrier island in a low-lying area or perhaps in a manufactured home. Again, it is at Manatee High School, and we are told that that shelter is pet-friendly. JB, we're going to go ahead and send it back to you in-house.
Live from Anna Maria Island, Allison Henning reporting for us. We'll catch you tonight, everybody, on WFLA News Channel 8 on your side here in Tampa Bay. Again, back here with Ian Oliver here, everybody. And also, let's bring in to WRIC Chief Meteorologist John Bernier joining us there in the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. John, let's get you involved here. What are you seeing from Rich? I know that in Virginia, you're going to have to deal with this later on in the week, but what are you monitoring at this hour with this 8 o'clock advisory that just came in here on Elsa?
A couple of things of note with that. The faster motion of the storm could play a part in the future track of this system, because remember, the faster it's going, the wider the turn is going to be, and that could cause it to end up coming a little further, taking that track and kind of shifting it a little further west. And through the past few model runs, we have seen that track when it goes through North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, vacillate back and forth. About 60 miles, which is not uncommon with these storms. And that does have implications because, again, even for you in Florida, as you're watching this, remember this storm is Ian said, it's lopsided. All the real action's on the east side of the storm, including those squalls that are about 25 miles to the southwest of Venice right now. It's really where the strongest part that we can see on the radar out of Tampa happens to be. But that could affect where we see the potential for some severe weather here in Virginia, possibly over the southeastern part of the state. Could be, in eastern portions of North Carolina. Of course, if it can come a little further inland, stay a little further inland, it may knock the sustained winds down a little bit, but that's not really going to be a big factor with this. In fact, you know, the change between a tropical storm at 70 miles an hour and a hurricane at 74 miles an hour, they rounded up to 75, is really like going about 64 miles an hour on the interstate and 69 miles an hour on the interstate and 65-mile-an-hour speed zone. You really don't notice the difference. The effects on you are going to be the same. It's more just the naming structure of it.
Again, WRIC Chief Meteorologist John Bernier. All right, everybody, let's bring everybody in here. We just had the live report from Allison Henning there at Anna Maria Island. Again, JB Buno, Ian Oliver, John Bernier, ready for the meteorologist Q&A portion. If you've stuck around this long here on this 8 o'clock edition of Tracking the Tropics, you want to get your question answered here out of the Facebook Live comments section. Let's get to some of the comments that are coming in here. And again, if you've never been with us here before on Tracking the Tropics, very simple how this works. Just find us on Facebook, and if you might see the pinned comment on the bottom of your screen, but if you don't, use hashtag HeyJohn, hashtag HeyIan, or hashtag HeyJB, and we can feature your comment like Barb's comment here, hashtag HeyJB. How bad will it affect Indian Rocks Beach? Ian?
Unfortunately, that's a place that's really going to get the teeth of this thing. Coastal areas in Pinellas County likely see the worst of this storm system. We can see it now. It's within range of max defender rate, well within range, and you can see that basically donut offshore. Of course, the western and southern side have gotten eaten away by some of that dry air that's been allowed by this lopsided system to make it into that center, never really gaining that classic shape, never has had it over the last few days. But if you look eyeball test, and we showed you the forecast track, how close that eastern side of that circle, that is the most intense part of this system at that point, how close that comes to Pinellas County is going to determine the difference between the higher end tropical storm force, borderline hurricane force wind gusts that we could see in that area, and perhaps dialing that back a bit closer to the 40 to 60 mile per hour range. So we'll be watching every little wobble with this system as we move on through the next few hours. But as John pointed out, good news in this update, if you're looking for good news in an update that upgraded it from a tropical storm to a hurricane, again, we talked about how that's mostly just a tiny threshold issue there, was the motion that it's picking up speed once again. There is an upper level feature, an upper level low that's pushing this system from the south and west. It's accelerating it to the north and east. So what we want is for this thing to get in and out. We want this thing to push off to our north, get those impacts out of here as fast as we can. But unfortunately, let's do this. Now that it's within range of max defender rate, we can look. This is going to be, well, off the deck, they call it in radar. This is a live picture now at max defender rate. I'll get zoomed in into that inner core, and we can see what kind of winds we're seeing right on the eastern side of that, which we talked about as the strongest part of the system. So this is actually the velocity values coming back to max defender rate at this point. Live look at velocity. Let's get this over. Here it is right there, and we can actually query that. At this point, away from our radar site, we're looking a little bit better than 4,000 feet above the surface. So we're looking at some winds there towards the core in the 65 to 70 range at the high end. So that's what we're looking at close to that core. There's a 70. Okay, so that's why we saw this upgrade. We're approaching that hurricane threshold. We've got another reconnaissance flight that's going to be moving back into Elsa. So we're going to get a very clear picture in the short term from the National Hurricane Center about the structure of this system. We're looking at a low-end Category 1 hurricane here. At least a small piece of this system is at that threshold, and that's the piece that sadly could be moving very close to western Pinellas County. So it's a long answer, but unfortunately, that's the worst part of our area, is likely going to be from Pinellas County points north up the Nature Coast.
Yeah, Indian Rocks Beach was the last question that we had. SC Hollinsworth saying, hashtag hey John, good to see you. Miss RIC. And then also, John, we'll throw it right back over to you from Susan, hashtag HJB. Do you think it's going to get stronger than a Cat 1? And do they expect a direct hit on Hernando County north of Tampa here?
Well, I think what's going to happen is, again, it's not going to get much stronger. And to point out what Ian was talking about with those winds that he was measuring at about 65 to 70 miles an hour. Now, that's 4,000 feet off the ground. And the important thing to remember with that is that's the winds aloft. The question is going to be, will these heavy downpours pull that wind down with it, okay? So that's going to be the area that we see. The other thing that's going to happen as this storm goes north, really as we head northward up towards Cedar Key, again, where the coastline starts to bend back to the west, this could increase the storm surge right there where we've got the bend westward. So, we've got the bend going from, 2 o'clock towards noon on the clock, as you want to look at it that way, taking up towards Gainesville. So the faster motion going northward may help us here in St. Petersburg, Sarasota, Bradenton, Tampa. But as you go further north and you get that curve back on the coastline up there towards Inglis and Cedar Key, you're going to have an area that's going to be, almost a 90-degree angle coming in. So we can get a little enhanced flooding up there. And then, of course, we've had a lot of rain already down in central Florida, and people saying it's been raining and pouring every day. And our ground is very level here. So if we get a couple of inches of rain really quick, and this is going to be a function of rainfall intensity versus speed, we could be looking at some flash flooding situations, urban and small stream flooding that's going to be going on. And of course, you see those rainfall totals that we've got going up, extending all the way up through Savannah and up towards Sumter. Remember, those areas have had some very heavy rainfall recently up there going up the coastline. So that's going to be something we're going to watch. Faster speed of the storm does mitigate some of the rainfall, but it also gives you a chance of maybe causing the storm to go a little further west than the track forecast is right now.
Let's get to this one here from Lynn, #AJB, #AEN. What does Hudson, Florida's impact look like? Thank you for all you do to keep us informed. Hudson, Florida, right there in the Newport Richey area, coastal community there in Pasco County, Ian. They could be seeing some rough hours in the near future.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's an area that is included in the hurricane warning. Some of the worst that Elsa will bring to the Tampa Bay area will be in that part of the Tampa Bay area. Those are the hurricane warnings: coastal Hillsborough, all the Pinellas, coastal parts of Pasco, Hernando, and up at the Citrus. So yes, Hudson is included with that. I'll show you our forecast model here, which is just to give you kind of a ballpark as far as the timing of the heaviest of the rain. I think this is a little slow. I don't see this forecast model really having a full-on grasp of that little speed up that we saw coming from that last update from the National Hurricane Center. But heading into about 9 o'clock tonight, 11 o'clock tonight, now we're starting to see some of that heavy rainfall in Newport Richey. But we're most concerned about for coastal parts of Pasco County will be later on tonight when we see the wind direction shift back to the west, and you get that onshore component that's pushing water onto our shores. That's what's going to cause the water to pile up. It generates that storm surge or sea level rise. 2 to 4 feet of sea level rise at that high tide cycle is a definite possibility with this, similar to what we saw with Ada at the end of last season. So that is going to be a threat with this. And if you live in one of those flood prone areas in Hudson, that's something to be very mindful and very aware of overnight tonight.
Monitoring a lot of different Facebook Live comment sections right now, but we're really honed in on the WFLA Facebook page here on Tracking the Tropics. Want to get to as many of the immediate impact areas here as possible, especially with Category 1 Hurricane Elsa here nearing the Tampa Bay area here at this hour. Let's get to this one here from Tracy Oliver here, #HeyJohn. I'm in the Florida Keys. This storm is no longer a threat here, but the Dunedin, Florida area near Tampa is in the path. My youngest son is there in college. I'm worried. Dunedin, Florida, the spring training home at the Toronto Blue Jays here in the Tampa Bay area. A lot of folks live in Dunedin, and Tracy here worried about her son, John.
Well, again, first of all, the number one thing to remember with this is that the main threat, really in any hurricane, is water, okay? That's the main threat. So as long as he's in a spot where, he can stay safe from flash flooding, he should be fine. Again, minimal hurricane. So the core of these strong winds is very small. This is not a gigantic storm, okay, with it. So the core of the wind's very small, and a lot of that's probably going to stay right along or just off the coastline. So, there's only going to be sporadic high winds. We may see a spotty tornado or two, but we get those in Florida. And again, most tornadoes that occur with hurricanes and tropical systems are low-end tornadoes. They're the EF0s, the EF1s. Yes, they do cause damage. Yes, they can cause injury, but they are not the catastrophic tornadoes that you see out in the plains where you see, swaths where looks like whole neighborhoods have been destroyed. So These are very weak and they tend to skip around. So for the most part, as long as he's not in a very low-lying spot, he should be safe. And of course, hopefully, he's watching the Toronto Blue Jays. Hopefully they're watching the Toronto Blue Jays tonight. The Red Sox playing a couple of hours out there against the California Angels. First place Red Sox, folks.
Yeah, don't remind me, John.
John's speaking my language, JB.
Yeah, I
think it might be 2-1 all of a sudden on this broadcast.
All of a sudden, I'm getting ganged up here. I'm not going to talk about the current structure of the AL East. We're going to talk about the current structure of Hurricane Elsa here, a Category 1 storm. For those of you just joining us here, again, use a hashtag to be featured here. We can get to your comments here out of the Facebook Live comment section using hashtag #HeyJohn, hashtag #HeyIan, and hashtag #HeyJB. Real quick, Ian, I see you're not playing tic-tac-toe here on the center of our screen.
That's my kind of unscientific John Madden drawings, but that circle that we're seeing coming back to radar, we've seen the structure of the system. When we still had the visible satellite earlier, there was that low-level swirl that was mostly naked on the west and southern side. That was an indication that the system was tilted. We had this lopsided structure with height. We've been talking about that for days now. So where I drew those X's, we can't assume that that's exactly where the center of Elsa is, but it's where the center of the mid-level circulation is, which right now is where the worst of the storm is. I drew an X an hour ago, and then obviously that current X is where it is right now. That's a displacement there of about 26 miles. So you could say that the mid-level part of the storm right now, outrunning that low-level circulation, moving about 26 miles per hour. Again, very unscientific John Madden illustration there, but this is moving quickly. So you look at the southern part of Sarasota County, down where it crosses into Charlotte, that mid-level center of circulation is essentially parallel to that. That's quicker than expected. So hopefully it continues this fast pace and we can get this in and out. That'll minimize the time period that we're dealing with the tornado risk. As John was saying, it brings down rainfall tallies, but the one thing we're not going to escape with this system is that potential storm surge, and that's always the most dangerous part of tropical systems.
John Madden would be proud, I think, to say the least here, Ian. Let's get to Hayden's comment here, hashtag #HeyIan. What's the strongest level? I'll throw this one both of your ways here, John and Ian. Hayden asking, hashtag #HeyIan, what's the strongest level a tornado could be tonight? Also, how long does a water spout last on land? An interesting question here as far as tropics education from Hayden.
You want to start with that one, John?
Yeah, I'll start with that. Well, first of all, when a water spout goes on land, it becomes a tornado. Traditionally, water spouts, because they've got water inside of them, they hit land, they're relatively weak because they got to drop all the water. Most tornadoes in a hurricane itself generally are heavily EF0 tornadoes. And then you get a few EF1s, depending upon the landfall and the structure. And again, it's for the roughness of the surface, which in western part of Florida, the ground surface is not very rough. Okay, when you start getting a little further inland, you can start to occasionally get some EF2s. I've seen tropical systems on very rare occasions. For example, Ivan in 2004. Up in Rixieville, Virginia, dropping an what then was an F3, now would be an EF3 tornado, but that's really the only one that I've seen. So for the most part, these are very low-end tornadoes. They mix in, and most of them don't have very long paths or very large widths. It is an exception to when you get one that's bigger. A lot of times it's almost hard to distinguish them from the actual hurricane damage from just the winds of the storm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people here in the Tampa Bay area, we get a lot of our tornadoes from cold fronts in the wintertime. The dry season, cold front moves onshore. You get a little water spout that develops offshore, and then it dissipates pretty quickly when we move onshore. This is a bit of a different animal just because most of the spin here in the atmosphere is being generated by the tropical system controlling the environment. You've got bands of strong thunderstorms moving onshore quickly. There's a lot of shear in the atmosphere, and it can produce some tornadoes. I will say a very encouraging sign is that I did expect to see more tornado warnings across southwest Florida, and we really didn't see that many. We only saw a few of those.
A couple, like 2 or 3.
Yes, so
is what we saw.
That's encouraging. Of course, that can change as it moves farther to the north, but it's of course better than the alternative. So we'll hope that trend persists as the system drifts through our area.
Connie, real quick here, or John, do you want to finish that thought?
Sure. Well, I was going to get to, and we'll answer that question. When's it going to impact Tampa? Well, we're starting to get the impacts now. The worst of it's probably going to be for us in a time span of about 3 to 6 hours from now is when the worst of it. We will steadily deteriorate, and then afterwards we'll start to improve. I was going to have Ian bring back up Max Defender 8 and show you the lightning associated with what's going on right now with the system. And there is a good cluster of lightning that's there, as you can see, off to the east of Sarasota. I can see it on one of the lightning summaries that I've got dialed up on another computer right here. You can see the lightning strikes. They've actually just jumped up on your clicker in the past few minutes from 69 to 82. One of the things to watch, and I think Ian on Max Defender 8 radar, you can pull up that up, would be to look at the positive charges versus the negative charges, the polarity right there. And I don't know if you've got that button set up to where you can.
We don't have that as a quick button, but it's pretty much, we have it set as those are the tall columns here. The tall white columns are mostly the tall positive white columns.
Let me see if I've got the same system dialed up over here, and let me see if I can pull it up on this side over here. Let me move that window over. There we are. Okay, so yeah, we're looking at the total strikes I've just seen that I've got a shorter time span are 33. One of the things that we watch with that is going to be if we all of a sudden see a large jump in these tall spikes that Ian has, which would be representing the positive mine. They're yellow in color on my system. Positive strikes do a couple of things. For one, when you get a large percentage of positive strikes, that can indicate a better tornado potential. The other thing is positive lightning strikes will travel a much longer distance, up to about 13 miles away. Now, that's fine because all this is well offshore. That's a good chunk away from Bradenton right now, as you can see. But that'll be close to watching this thing makes landfall, because those lightning strikes, when they're positive polarity, tend to be stronger, tend to cause more damage, and actually can cause more physical harm.
Next question here that we're getting in is from Kelly McConnell. Hashtag HeyJB, my family and I are heading to Bonita Springs Thursday morning from Chicago. Do you think that there will be any damage, flooding to the beaches in that area? So again, we get a lot of travel questions, a lot of folks asking questions from other portions of the country, people who are planning on being in Florida this week or this weekend. So for Kelly joining us, what do we say here, Ian?
I would say at this point, this was pretty far offshore of Bonita Springs, Bonita Beach. Have we had? I know we had a crew down there. Did we have any reports? I wouldn't think that. And when was the time of this?
You know, I know that we have crews, and I can bring up some different crews here. But I know that we have crews like that's Melanie Michael, who's standing live here next to a sign. Not sure what she found here. We have crews all across the Tampa Bay area. Let's show you this feed here as well. That's Chip Osowski. Wow, look at that shot. Beautiful sky there
Down
behind.
Clearwater?
I believe that he is. That's clearly Pinellas County beaches. I believe
that's the pier, I think.
It is.
I got Bonita Springs here on Max Defender 8. Wouldn't want to be there vacationing right now, that's for sure. But the core of this passed well off to the west. I would imagine that there's got to be some sort of at least minor beach erosion going on with this. The center of the circulation is north of that area now, so we've already switched in this part of Florida, southwest Florida, into that onshore flow. So we must be getting at least a little bit of storm surge there, but I think the core of this was likely far enough to the west. That would be my assumption based on radar, but of course if we had a crew down there, we would need to get a report from them. But I would say as long as it's not in the next couple days, you're in good shape.
Again, JB Buno, John Bernier from WRIC, Chief Meteorologist there in Richmond, as well as Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Ian Oliver here with you live on Tracking the Tropics. 8 o'clock advisory came down about 45 or so minutes ago in advance of the hour, letting us know that Elsa, as expected, returned to Category 1 hurricane status. Now, that's really just more of a categorization thing, meaning that of course, the wind speeds have gone beyond 70 miles per hour. What are the wind speeds, actually, Ian, that we got in that 8 o'clock advisory?
75.
75 mile per hour winds. So we have that elevating it to Category 1 hurricane status. What does that mean for where you live, especially if you're here in the Tampa Bay area or if you're on the Florida coast? That's why we have meteorologists Ian Oliver and John Bernier here with us to answer your questions in this meteorologist Q&A. Use one of the hashtags on our screens here, hashtag #HeyJohn, hashtag #HeyIan, or hashtag #HeyJB. We'll get to your questions. Here's a super hyper local one for the Tampa area here. Hashtag #HeyIan from Greg Candell. What is the risk of a flood around Mckay Bay? We don't usually get too many questions around pertaining to Mckay Bay, but that's right here in the heart of Tampa, not too far away, really. Palmetto Beach, that area.
From the port,
right here, what do we say for Mckay Bay?
So this Florida-looking illustration on your screen right now, that's the most intense part of the storm. That's the part of the storm that we need to keep off of Pinellas County. And you saw that little jog. There is definitely still some motion west of north, it looks like, still with Elsa, thankfully, which would be pulling it, at least in the short term, away from the coastline. But of course, we do expect that turn to due north, and then eventually, I wanted to pull this back up. Okay, they're calling it due north. I don't know what they have for degrees, but I would imagine that there's some component just west of due north. That would keep the worst of it. That's where we would see the worst of the surge too. Once we get this center of circulation just north of the bay, we'll start seeing that wind direction shift to the west and southwest. That's what will push water into the bay tonight with the high tide cycle. I believe for St. Pete Pier, it was sometime between 2 and 3 a.m. Roughly ballpark, your high tide cycle in Mckay Bay would be between 12 and 3 a.m. tonight. So that's going to be the high tide cycle that we're concerned about when we have that west and southwest wind that pushes water into the bay, a shallow bay that's very susceptible to storm surge. You're not really talking about that much water in the grand scheme of things, with a average depth of just 8 to 12 feet outside of the spots that have been dredged, of course, the shipping channels and all that. But that water gets pushed into the bay and it can't come back out. And when you have the actual astronomical tide coming up, that's where we see the biggest threat. So it's that high tide cycle tonight. Right now, we were thinking about 2 to 4 feet of possible surge inside the bay. So if you live in a place near Mckay Bay that is right close to the water, that is definitely a concern, that high tide cycle during the overnight hours tonight.
We've been talking a lot of Tampa Bay area impacts here on this particular. We've been doing episodes all day here on Tracking the Tropics, but let's get to a landfall-related question here, John, from David LeCramp. David asking, hashtag #HeyJohn, when/where will the center of this hurricane hit land?
Let's probably say around lunch tomorrow, maybe a little bit later, and it looks like it's going up towards coming in somewhere close to Cedar Key, and then it's going to pass right to the west of Gainesville, where my son-in-law's mother lives, and head up that way. And then, of course, once it comes inland, it's going to start shredding itself and weakening. And actually, we were discussing the tornado watch and how the limited number of tornado warnings have occurred. It's really probably going to be starting tomorrow afternoon, where I could see the tornado threats maybe taking a spike up as we go up through Lake City and then head up over towards Valdosta, Georgia, because the system's going to start getting roughed up by the land surface. And the ocean's real nice because the ocean's nice and smooth, and the land is a big time friction surface. So if you want to think about it, this thing's going to get a real bad case of road rash in a hurry when it comes on shore. And that's what helps spark up some more of the tornadoes, especially on the east side of that track. So if you go towards Gainesville and you go west of Jacksonville into the northern part of Florida, that's where we'll probably see the tornado threat go up. But this is probably a midday landfall tomorrow in that area. And then, of course, you're going to have the wind shifting around, as Ian's been telling you, to the west and southwest behind us. So we'll get some water piled up against the coastline up there as we go through the late morning hours into early afternoon.
We just got a question in here that we don't shy away from all these types of questions. Sometimes they're sarcastic or rhetorical questions that we get here in the Facebook Live comment section. Ian knows where I'm going with this, but we can talk about this. Alex Cook Jr. here saying, hashtag #HeyJB, why is everyone acting like they haven't done this before?
I love this question.
I love this question too, and I'm glad that Alex asked this question. I'll bring all of us up here on screen because a lot of folks here in the Sunshine State here in Florida haven't done this before. We have so many new Floridians that have just gone to the DMV in the last 6 months or so to get that Florida driver's license because they just got down here to Florida within the last few months or last year or so. So an influx
and celebrating no income tax in the state.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah,
it's a beautiful
thing. A lot of great reasons to live in Florida. We've got Tom Brady. We have a Stanley Cup, maybe two. We can talk about that.
Yeah, how about the timing? The timing of this storm coming between the two games, and the game tomorrow night in Tampa. Maybe hoisting the cup there. Victor Hedman getting to hoist the cup up along with Ian Kucherov.
How first of all, John Bernier very clearly versed on our hometown Tampa Bay Lightning here, but yes, how appropriate would it be if the Tampa Bay Lightning hoisted this in the midst of a tropical storm, now Hurricane Elsa, arriving here in the Tampa Bay area? But to Alex's point here, you guys, again, why is everyone acting like we haven't done this before? Just all those new people coming into the stadium.
Yeah, we've had a huge influx of people, especially last year during the pandemic. We had a lot of people coming down to Florida from all different parts of the country. There's that. Then there's also the element of this now Hurricane Elsa. We've been talking about this all day today, JB. We talked about this all day yesterday. The impacts changed this much, 0, once we had that name change. The forecast has been on track. We saw a wind increase via the National Hurricane Center of 5 miles per hour. The impacts have not changed with this. There is no reason to be any more concerned about Hurricane Elsa at 8 o'clock than you were about Tropical Storm Elsa at 5 o'clock. That has not changed. You need to have your preps done for the impacts that we've been discussing earlier today, and now we're hoping that this system will just skirt us and keep on moving. It's a powerful, lopsided, ragged-looking system, but one that is going to be problematic in parts of our area.
That is going to be, and there you have problems with these when you go into the parts of the country, the northern parts of the country, where a lot of people have now moved to Florida from. You, in a way, get the same reactions in a snowstorm. You've been through the snowstorms before, but everybody is like, there's 6 inches, 10 inches of snow forecasted, and everybody is all of a sudden at Publix cleaning out the shelves. Or Kroger cleaning out the shelves. Let's give them both some love. That's a good both down there in Florida. It's not like they haven't been through it before, but I think it becomes in a way a little bit of herd mentality that people start to follow and sometimes get a little too worked up over it. Yes, there are threats from this storm. This storm is not catastrophic, okay? And to be honest, folks, tropical storm, Category 1 hurricane, even Category 2 hurricanes. The main threat in all of these storms is water, okay? It is the flooding. That's the main threat. It's not really the winds. Your homes, hopefully, if they've been built to code, are reasonably built to withstand with these. The real wind threat gets when we get to the Category 3 storm. And one of the issues is that with all the new residents in Florida, many who haven't been through a Category 1 hurricane, is hardly any of them until a couple of years ago were through a Category 3 or a Category 4 storm. Or you look at, when Michael went in up in the Panama City Beach area, being a Category 5 storm, that was a terrible, terrible storm. That was, an experience that they hadn't had in that part, and that was a lot of devastation for them. We are going to have some damage. It's not going to be catastrophic. Let's remember that. Okay.
All right. We just got in some interesting response questions here, but Veronica Lynham, #KJB, LOL, 100% true. Also, a lot of Tom Brady love that just popped up here in the Facebook Live comment section. I mentioned Tom Brady's name to people in Tampa Bay, and immediately it's like lighting up a Christmas tree.
As it should.
As it should be, of course. Maria Castillo. And then look at this, right on cue. Maria here asking, #Hey John, new from California here. What we were just talking about, what to expect in Land O'Lakes, Florida. Any flooding, winds, rain, Land O'Lakes, right north of Tampa and Pasco County. So a Californian becomes a Floridian here, John, in Land O'Lakes.
Well, one thing to remember, first of all, since you're inland, you're not going to have storm surge. Okay, you're not going to have storm surge. Your main threat is going to be the potential for flash flooding or the potential in a developed area, what we call urban and small stream flooding. Okay, now You go up to the Land O'Lakes area. I mean, there are lakes all over the place. So you could see some of the drainage ditches get overrun through there. For example, you go up someplace like Connors Lake, for say, Lake Thomas Point, all these places built on the ponds. Low-lying areas are going to be suspect. If you have a lot of rain over a short period of time, the drainage system's not going to be able to handle it. That's going to be the problem, okay? You're going to get some winds, but you're inland, okay? You're inland away from this. So, you're not going to be at the core of the storm. So you're talking when you go inland, probably your maximum sustained winds, they might be 35, 45 miles an hour, like a bad thunderstorm that lasts for a couple of hours. Okay, that's really what it's going to be. Your main threat in inland areas is the flooding, the low-lying water. Again, if this thing moves at a nice, good pace, you get 3 or 4 inches of rain. That's spread out in a span of like 4 hours or less. You're going to have some problems. Spread that out 8 or 10 hours. The drainage system's going to have time to work on. So that's the thing to watch for. So.
Really quickly, we can get to this comment from Fran because John was just talking about it a moment ago. #Hey John, will the NHL hockey game be canceled in Tampa? And we have been in talks with the NHL, with the Tampa Bay Lightning as of right now. Game 5 on Wednesday night in Tampa at Amalie Arena, with the chance of the Lightning hoisting the cup again here and a chance to do it on home ice. 8 o'clock, that start time on Wednesday night. That game right now is on, but this is all subject to change based on what Elsa does here to the Tampa Bay area. Tammy Haynes, #KJB. Look, another one new here from Los Angeles. Will Lithia ENC tornadoes? I promise I've not cleaned the shelves. Thank you. And got to give Tammy a shout out here for not, loading all the jugs of water and toilet paper packs into her shopping cart on the way out of Publix. But Lithia tornado chance here, Ian?
Always appreciated. We get the tornado watch for Hillsborough County for areas along south of I-4, all those counties. It runs until 11 p.m. So the threat is there. A tornado watch basically means that the ingredients in the atmosphere are there to produce at least isolated tornadoes. We're seeing some of those bands move in those stronger bands, the heavier rain, the thunderstorms. That's where we would see the potential for some embedded tornadoes. We talked about the trends so far. We haven't seen many to this point. In fact, the Tampa Bay area, not to jinx it, has yet to have a tornado warning just yet. But you look at that core that's now approaching the area, it's going to be over the next 8 hours or so. I wouldn't be surprised if that warning is extended and then also extended in area farther off to the north to include Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus as we head into the overnight hours tonight. It's a risk. It's an isolated risk. So you're going to see some stronger bands move through with some gusty winds, probably not worse than you experienced on Saturday. That threat is going to be there, and we're going to be watching for it all night for you with Max Defender 8. But that's a low-end threat. It's going to be an isolated threat with this system. And I wanted to point out, while we have the radar pulled back up here, we didn't talk about the wind field yet in this episode yet, JB. Latest update from the National Hurricane Center, they said the hurricane force winds extend out 20 miles from the center of circulation, and the tropical storm force winds extend out 90 miles. So that's a little bit larger than earlier when the storm was just a peanut, producing tropical storm force winds out 70 miles. That's why 10, 20 miles matter with this system, how close it comes to the Pinellas County coastline, because that has a lot to do with not only the wind speed, but how much surge we end up seeing in the coastal spots.
Again, if you're just joining us here, everybody, this is going to be now a last call for your questions here, everybody, on this edition of Tracking the Tropics. But don't you worry, because we're going to be live with every NHC update here as Tropical Storm, I keep saying Tropical Storm Elsa just because of habit, Hurricane Elsa now near the Tampa Bay area, really, of course, already causing impacts here in the Tampa Bay area, but off of the Florida coast there. Let's get a little tiny bit closer.
And Ian, if I can jump in just for 1 second,
go right ahead, John.
And JB, just a note from our friends at the Storm Prediction Center out in Norman, Oklahoma. Wonderful, wonderful place out there. They are hinting that they think that the tornado risk may start to increase probably in about another hour to an hour and a half as we head towards Venice and Sarasota, as some of those heavier bands come along the coastline, possibly beginning to move in. So, The threat is there, Lauren Coleman, who's got the question on the screen right now for Hillsborough County. The threat is there. Is it a huge threat? No, this is not a huge threat. And the other thing to remember, the vast majority of tornadoes associated with hurricanes tend to be on the weaker ones. If you go back a long time ago, Hurricane Isabel, which was one of the stronger ones along the East Coast recently, hurricanes, that was back in 2003. That up in Virginia took power out to 95% of the Hampton Roads area, 95% of the Metro Richmond area. It was the exception to have lights on for everyone. That, I think, produced 2 tornadoes. So it varies with every storm. We try to cover the possibilities of this and alert you that there's at least a potential. And of course, as Ian was saying, when you go up to Villages, Spring Hill, expect it, folks. You're going to get a tornado watch. Probably it's going to kick into effect after midnight for you up there.
This is a question that's been in the queue for a little bit here from Kayla. I'm going to throw this one over Ian's way. #AJB. How badly will Brooksville, Weeki Wachee, that area be hit?
Yeah, that's going to be an area that's a bit closer to the landfall, likely up towards Levy County. And as we showed you with some of the projections from the storm surge, I do think that is one of the parts of the Tampa Bay area that unfortunately see the highest risk of some of that storm surge flooding. I'll try to get zoomed in on this for you as we head up towards coastal parts of Hernando and Citrus County. You see some of those yellows indicating some areas up there that could see in excess of 3 feet of sea level rise. So this is, again, fairly comparable to what we saw with Ada toward the end of last season. An eventual landfall up towards the Cedar Key. If you saw Jeff Patterson's reports on WFLA earlier, it was bringing me back. This was pre-tracking the Tropics days, JB, but I remember I was out in the field covering that storm, Hermine, that moved onshore directly in Cedar Key. So they have a point of reference. You don't really have to go too far down the road, just back to 2016, to seeing a hurricane making a landfall in the Cedar Key area.
Let's get to this next. Hermine has been on the tip of a lot of tongues here today as far as our coverage on WFLA. Let's get a little closer to Orlando, about, Polk County, right there in the middle of Orlando and Tampa. John, Brittany Adams here asking, what kind of weather should they expect in Polk County?
Well, you're going to start seeing conditions deteriorate over the next couple of hours. And what's going to be happening is you're going to get pretty good rainfall. Again, 2 to 4 inches of rain. Again, the isolated tornado, it's a possibility. It's not set in stone. It's the exception rather than the rule. And those winds, because you're far enough inland, should not top out at more than 40 miles an hour unless you get a real strong downburst coming out of one of the storms through there. So that's the one thing to watch for. It's going to be a messy, nasty night. That's what it's going to be as you go through Legoland and Indian Lake Estates and over towards Arcadia and those areas. That just going to be just messy is what it's going to be.
We've been doing Tracking the Tropics, and John Bernier was part of that record-setting 2020 hurricane season when we had more than 100 episodes. We've done hundreds of episodes of Tracking the Tropics over the last couple of years, and I've never this next question, I've never seen this one before, and I couldn't help but chuckle here a little bit, Ian, from Amy Brooks, #, Ian. What's the weather like at 6 a.m. in this zip code, 34698 in Dunedin? So I don't know if we can hyper-localized forecast for three.
Wait a minute. The last 4 digits are missing from that zip code.
Yeah, right. That's going to delay delivery.
Yeah,
that's not our fault.
The hyphenated zip code there. It's just but Dunedin here, Ian. What do we say for him?
Dunedin, one of my favorite places in Tampa Bay. Just an awesome spot up in Dunedin, breweries and everything. Let's get zoomed in a little bit farther. This is our forecast model, so again, you can't assume this is exactly what we'll see. But heading into the overnight hours tonight, so we get into the northern part of Pinellas, let's bring this back a little bit. So we get past 10 o'clock, midnight, 2 a.m., 4 a.m. I think that's really going to be, we've been talking about the last couple of days, 10 p to 4 a was really going to be the worst part for the central portion of the Tampa Bay area, and that includes Dunedin. Now, depending on where you're at in Dunedin, good portion of Dunedin, Honeymoon Island, obviously directly on the Gulf Coast. That's where we could see some of that sea level rise, and that won't happen until your high tide cycle that occurs after midnight tonight when you get the wind shift. We showed you that graphic, 2 to 4 feet sea level rise, a possibility with a peak storm surge. We'll be watching for that threat very closely. We're hoping that this can wobble a little bit farther off to the west, take it away from the Pinellas County coastline. We're seeing a little bit of that trend on Max Defender 8, but we'll be watching that closely for you tonight.
The final trio.
And of course, as we head towards 6 a.m., we're going to be moving. We've got the high tide cycle just after midnight. We're going to be moving obviously towards the low tide cycle, where the tide will be receding from the area. And as you watch that model there, really by 7 or 8 a.m., just about all the precipitation, the vast majority of it's gone from us. Actually 6 a.m., it may actually be not too bad outside for you there.
Yeah, we could get back to regular old summer pretty quickly around here.
Yeah, somebody maybe looking at concerned about their morning run tomorrow before the humidity kicks in here.
Man, fingers crossed for an easy morning for us here in the Tampa Bay area. John Bernier joining us, everybody, from WRIC, Chief Meteorologist there in Richmond, Virginia. Real quick, final trio of questions here on this 8 o'clock episode of Tracking the Tropics, and we're going to go 2 for 1 here. Nicole asking, #KJB, how long is this storm? Joe Stinson asking, #KJB, when do you think Elsa will have heavy effects on Savannah, Georgia here? So, John, you're perfect here as far as the days ahead here. We can talk about really briefly beyond the state of Florida, areas like Savannah, and then even beyond Savannah up the East Coast here. What are you watching for as Elsa treks northward?
Okay, as we go northward, the effects of Savannah really are going to be in about 24 hours from now. As you go further north, because you can see that storm is going to be moving into the southern portions of Georgia by later tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. So let's go into tomorrow night for Savannah. You're on the east side of that storm. My cousin used to live in Savannah, by the way. And it's going to be close enough to where you're going to get heavy rain. The other thing is that along the East Coast, we're going to have issues with a lot of rip currents there along the beaches. So the weather may be nice during the day tomorrow, but we've got to watch the beaches for the rip currents. So Savannah's probably going to have a rough time tomorrow evening, tomorrow night. It's going to be affecting Charleston, South Carolina by early Thursday morning. And as we go into Thursday afternoon, it does weaken down, according to the models, back to a tropical depression as you head up towards the area, towards Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And then if we extend it a little further, it's going somewhere into Virginia, and it'll be here in about 48 hours from now. And that's when what's little that's left of my hair will be getting pulled out as I deal with the storm up here.
So. Right there on your map on the right side of your screen, everybody, Richmond, that's where WRIC Chief Meteorologist John Bernier is spending a portion of his evening before Hurricane Elsa makes its way up towards his neck of the woods. A follow-up comment, we had this comment here earlier from Alex saying, #KJB, why is everyone acting like they haven't done this before? Well, a follow-up comment here from Alex here on Facebook Live, #KJB. We're built for this. We're built for this here in the hours ahead. Of course, some very, very smart state officials. Governor DeSantis has been speaking today. Local, county, state officials here ready for what Elsa's got in store.
Yeah, this is why we prepare. It takes the stress out of situations. We talk about it in the preseason episodes of Tracking the Tropics. You got a kit, you got a plan, and then you just have to execute it when events like this happen. High-end tropical storm, low-end Category 1 hurricane, we can handle it. It's part of living in this part of the country. Worse than that, of course, much more preparation and action is necessary. We can handle this. We're just hoping that we get through Elsa without some of the same headaches and unfortunately damage that we saw with Ada.
And 30 years ago, when you guys were extremely young types, we learned a lot about hurricane preparation and hurricane mitigation, thanks to the disaster that was Hurricane Andrew down in the Miami area. We learned a lot about, this house may look nice if you're moving down here from Princeton, New Jersey, but it's not going to work in Florida. It's not a good design for us here. We learned a lot of that. We also learned a lot about the recovery aspects of what we have to do. So, past 30 years, we've made a lot of changes. The building codes have been strengthened tremendously. And, and those of you who are the new residents down here in Florida, or down there in Florida, since I'm up north, you're benefiting from a lot of the pain of 30 years ago that Florida went through. As a result of some people, you don't realize 2004, Max Mayfield used to have a picture he showed of a postcard that labeled Florida, had the Sunshine State crossed out and showed plywood on all the windows and labeled it the Plywood State because we were boarding up so much. So, we've learned a lot and we've improved a lot in really the last generation.
Certainly have. And we, as a reminder here, everybody, while we're here with John and Ian really quickly, we have our regular Wednesday episodes where we talk about tropics education, we talk about tropical development, we talk about storms past and how they influence our decisions of the future. So we really hope that you join us for Wednesday episodes on Tracking the Tropics, where we talk about these. We got some cool stuff in store for the remainder of this hurricane season, as far as having those Wednesday chats with meteorologists such as John Bernier. But again, joining us from WRIC in Richmond, Virginia, the chief meteorologist there, part of a great team, including friend of the program, Matt DiNardo, up there in Richmond, a great team at WRIC. So a big shout out to John for joining us here, everybody, on this 8 o'clock edition of Tracking the Tropics. It is now 9 o'clock Eastern time here. We're going to continue to monitor the movement of Hurricane Elsa as it continues to make its presence felt here in the Tampa Bay area. Again, you have your, as Ian noted, you have your hurricane plan at home. We have our hurricane plan here on Tracking the Tropics. We'll continue to keep you posted. Every new development, every little detail that we're finding here on Max Defender 8, we're going to bring it to you on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, and we'll be back here live with an additional update as the NHC gets us more data, more information to break down with the great meteorologists here with us, everybody on the team that is Tracking the Tropics. So for WRIC, Chief Meteorologist John Bernier joining us from Richmond, Tracking the Tropics meteorologist for WFLA, Ian Oliver there in the top right. I'm JB Buno. We have a lot more ahead in the hours ahead, but for now, we're going to take a closer look here at Elsa's development and progression over the next couple of hours, and we'll be back for additional updates here on Tracking the Tropics.
Thank you for watching Tracking the